Today we're going to be talking about all things auto layout in Figma. If you haven't heard of or used auto layout before, it's a really cool way of laying things out on your page or your frames or your designs in Figma, which is automated. So basically, if I was to add a new element to say this navbar, it's going to be perfectly positioned with the correct spacing on the left and right. And it also allows you to add sections. So for example, if you have a web page that you're building, it allows you to say, I want this section to have a padding at the top and bottom of X pixels. You know, it allows you to space things out, add padding, add spacing between the elements. It's just a really cool way of handing something over to a developer with, defined spacing between elements. And it works very similarly to Flexbox or Flex grids in CSS. So if you are familiar with CSS and you use Flex, then this is essentially the same thing. You've already got a bit of a head start. But if you are brand new to Figma, then hopefully this shouldn't be too daunting. So we've got two main use cases that you can see on my screen right now. And the first is a navigation bar, which you should be quite familiar with. So something quite sort of common on a website is to have this sort of layout with your main links and sort of a call to action button at the end. The second use case is what I'm calling a pill stack. So I would call one of these a pill. I don't know why they're called pills, but in UI, that's the sort of common term we use for any sort of rounded rectangle that contains some information. But this is a pill stack. So we've got 5 pills. So a common use case would be on an article, say at the bottom where it says related topics, that you could click through to see more articles in that topic. That's kind of what you'd use this for. So let's get started by trying to recreate this navbar at the top. So I'm just going to press the T, or just come up here and click the T here. And then just click once to add some text, and I'm going to say home. I'm going to press Control D and just move that duplicated copy out of the way and say about or boot. There we go. And again, we'll just Control D to copy and paste, and we'll say blog. And we'll do that again. We'll say get started for that button. Can't type today. So here we have our 4 navbar elements, and if I select all of them and then come over here and press the plus sign next to auto layout, what's happened is all 4 of these elements have been automatically added to a frame with the spacing between them made exactly the same. So you can see here on the right hand side underneath the auto layout settings, you've got this horizontal gap set to 35 pixels. So if I adjust this, you can see that's automatically adjusting the spacing between each element, and that is ultimately the baseline of what auto layout is and does. And I can rearrange the elements within this frame, and it's going to perfectly put them in the right place with the right spacing. So let's just quickly cover all of the auto layout sort of settings and options. So what we have here is direction, so we can create a vertical nav menu or a horizontal nav menu. And then we have wrap. So wrap's actually in use over here. So I'll just select frame 6 just so you can see these pills being used. So wrap basically means, if you have a little look at this section here, this basically defines where you want your elements to align from. So if we align to the top left, top right, and top middle and top right, or bottom, same thing. So all of these elements are going to start in the top left, and they're going to try and horizontally go across until they reach the edge of the box. Then they're going to automatically wrap down. So as you can see, if I just adjust the size of the box, really satisfying. This is a fairly recent addition to Figma, is this wrap feature, which will responsively and automatically adjust the wrapping and the spacing between each of these items. Sorry, not the spacing at all, sorry, just wrapping them down to the next line based on the width of the element. So that's really cool. So they're your sort of top 3, the 3 layout modes. So you've got horizontal and vertical, and then wrap. And again, if I just show you here, this is wrap in use, which is really cool. So the next thing to cover is exactly what I just did there without saying anything. So if I just bring this box so it's in a position where it's too big for the content, and while we're here, I'll just quickly show you again what doing this does. So pressing these buttons here in the layout origin controls, we can align them within the frame in any position we like, so they can start wherever we like within the frame. So if I click this one in the middle, the content wants to adjust and align itself to the very center of the box. That's almost the origin of the frame. Okay, so any content you place in it is going to try and start at that very center point. If I just had one link in there, just the home button, it's going to be perfectly centered in the very middle of this frame. but most commonly we'll stick to that top left. Now we're in a position where the frame is bigger than the content, and that's where these two boxes here come in. So just underneath the width and height controls, you can see at the moment they're set to fixed. Now what that means is that it's a fixed pixel amount set. So it's 518 pixels is the fixed width that we have set for this box. If I select this drop down and change that to hug contents, now what that means is the frame will always readjust to perfectly match the width of all of the content inside that frame if it was aligned in a straight line. So I'll show you what I mean here with our pill box again. So if I select all of these and set the width of this one from fixed to hug contents, it will align them all in a straight line. Because if I come back to a fixed width that I set myself, we've got this nice wrapping again. So we can do the same for height, set it to hug the contents, and now what that means is no matter what's in the box, no matter what the height or width of the elements in that box, the frame that contains them will automatically hug the height and hug the width. So we're set to exactly the same as the content. So we have the spacing between elements here in pixels. We'll just set that to 32. And we have two additional things down here to touch on. So this is more useful for if you have a section of a website. I'll just go with some sort of sexy red. And what we have here is horizontal and vertical padding. So this is the spacing between the edges of your frame and the content. So what this means is it's essentially, it's again the same as CSS, where we have padding. This is setting the left and right padding, so the amount of space between the content and the left and right hand sides of the frame. Now because it's set to hug, what this means is the frame's width is going to be the width of the content plus the spacing either side. So we've got the width of the content plus 32 pixels on the right, sorry 65, I'm down here, I've gone up one, 65 pixels on the right and 65 pixels on the left. We can manually adjust each one individually, and if I just pop this open by pressing this button here, you can see left, top, right and bottom padding. So you can adjust all of them independently, but I'm just going to set all of these to 0 and remove that fill, because the last thing I want to show you is how to add this button using auto layout. And the reason you would want to do that is because as you type or edit the content within that button, it's going to responsively resize. So I'm going to select this get started link, and I'm going to come, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to add it to a frame. So I'm going to right click and frame selection by Control-Alt-G, or just selecting that button. And now what we have is a frame, which I'm just going to quickly call button, that contains the text get started. Okay, so as you can see on the left, you've got the text contained within the frame. And I'm going to set auto layout on that frame. I'm just going to make sure that the width and height of the frame, is set to hug contents. Now these are hugging the inner content, so the get started text. I can add a padding on the top and bottom just to replicate a button. I'm going to add a fill. Let's go with a nice blue button, and let's change that text color to white, make it bold. All I did there was press Control B, pretty familiar shortcut for most software. And I'm going to add border radius just to round that button off. So the next problem we're facing is, if I just select the frame, you can see that we've got two problems. The button is now looking great, and as I adjust the sizing of the button based on the content within, it's automatically resizing, which is perfect. It's got the spacing set up. So what we need to do is, first of all, we need to get these all in line. As you can see, the home, blog and about are stuck to the top of the frame, and the get started seems to be fitting perfectly in the middle. So the reason is because we have set the origin point to the top left. So it's aligning currently to the top left. If we set this to the left, but bring it down to the middle, perfect. Okay, so you can use any of these three within all honesty, on that middle row. Because the last thing we need to do, if you can just see here where that line ends, for some reason the width has changed to fix. If we just set this back to hug, now we have our navigation bar working perfectly. Okay, so that's how you'd use auto layout to add a button, and that is genuinely the reason why I would suggest, if you're making buttons, to use auto layout, is so that you can add icons and text and completely change the content within the button, and it's still going to responsively resize to fit that content. And this saves you so much time further down the line. It might only take a few seconds, sure, to manually adjust the height and width of that button to fit the new content, But if every part of your website or your design or whatever it is you're designing is doing that automatically for you, then you're saving yourself an awful lot of time. So there is one more thing I just quickly want to show you, and this is not going to be pretty, but I'm just going to copy this and remove the links bar the button. I'm going to select the outer frame and I'm going to make it much bigger than the content. The last thing I want to show you is what happens if I select our button. Before I showed you two things that we had in underneath width, right? We had hug contents and we had fixed, where we set a specific pixel width for that frame. There's an additional one now, and I'll tell you why that has appeared. It's called fill container. This is because this element is contained within an auto layout frame. So this will be true for any of these buttons here. So the home button, all of them, because they're within a frame that is set to auto layout, they now have the ability to fill the container. So if I select my button, my get started button, and then change it to fill, now the width automatically takes up the full width of our outer frame, and I can adjust this manually myself, right? If I duplicate this button, they'll now both try and take up the maximum amount of space. So they're both set to fill. Just for the sake of OCD, let's set this to the center so it looks nice. These will now both, because they're both set to fill the container, they will both take up the maximum amount of room that they can, which, because there's two buttons within there, is half each, right? So plus the spacing in between that we still have complete control over. So let's say we want 16 pixels between all of our elements. That's still going to be respected, but now they're both set to fill the available space. So this is another really, really cool tool, particularly useful for laying out sections where you've got a big picture taking up the full height and width on the right, but then text content on the left hand side. You could set up two boxes with your content within them, both set to fill container on the width, and then place whatever you want inside. Both of them are going to equally take up half of that container frame. So this messy document is, I think, exactly what you need to understand the basics of auto layout in Figma, and I really hope that this made some sense to you. There's a lot more to dive into, but this is kind of just the kind of overview of the different ways to size the elements within a frame and the frame itself, different ways to use auto layout, so from buttons to entire navbars and pillboxes, and the different ways to align those buttons respective to the frame that they're contained within themselves. So I really, really hope this has been useful. As always, I will say this every single time I record a tutorial. If you're lost or you thought this absolutely sucked, drop a comment below, because that's exactly what I want to hear. I want to improve this. I want to make sure this helps you. That's my goal. So if you're lost, ask questions. I will start a conversation with you. We'll get your questions answered. That's my goal. Might even create a new video for you if it's helpful. But yeah, this is auto layout, and I will go into more detail in this sort of further down the line. I think as you design with me over these series, you'll probably get more and more familiar with these tools. But yeah, please like the video, please subscribe, and please leave a comment. It really does help me grow ultimately. So thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next time.